Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So it's going to be a battle report against Orcs and Goblins with Warriors of the Dark Gods this time. It's a new book for me. I haven't played that much against it yet, so I have a lot to discover basically about the book. My list for those who don't remember, I am working now with Warrior Knights, mostly with a Chosen Lord with Demonic Rings and Burning Portent. And a bit of a MSU style army. I'm still trying to figure out how I exactly want to play the army, but this is mostly going to be the gist of it. My opponent this time was mostly orcs and then some goblins mixed in the mix. So basically it's three big blocks of orcs, with one orc block being veterans, one of them being ferals and one iron orcs, so I do get to experience all the different flavors of orcs. There's also some Iron Orc chariots, and then a great green idol to support them, with some characters to further support the army. For deployment, we were playing Encircle, I believe. My opponent could give me a board where having the flanks was not that useful, to be honest. So I did get the flanks, my opponent got the middle. And we mostly deployed as such. This is, I believe, after my opponent's first turn movement, my first turn movement. So my opponent's big blocks from left to right. He has the feral orcs in the forest, then he has the veteran orcs in the middle, then the iron orcs on the hill, and then the iron orc chariots in front of his great green idol. For me, left to right, all the way on the left, I have warrior knights, then I have a warrior chariot, warrior knights. Another warrior chariot, then I have barbarians behind the Feldrogs at the field, then I have the Feldrogs. The block of warriors with the Alchemy Master and the Chosen Lord. Then a unit of Forsworn. I am forgetting the wretched one, it's close to my opponent's Grotlings. A unit of warrior knights and a unit of barbarians. So my opponent's Iron Orc Loner is already out and about, close to the building. I do have alchemy magic to counter him, however my opponent is also quite eager to protect his character. And he does have Basalt Infusion, such that Quicksilver Lash is not that effective against him. Also, I don't even think I took Quicksilver Lash. I think I took Molten Copper instead, because I thought it was still going to be a bit more useful against the Iron Orcs and the Iron Orc Chariots. However, I don't really know if that is true, and maybe I should have gone for Quicksilver Lash. Anyway, I do want to change my magic setup, so I'm gonna not dwell on that for too long. What else do we have? So, yeah, my opponent advanced up, mostly along his entire line. He does have some bows and some crossbows to shoot at me. I tried in my first turn to charge the Grotlings with my Forsworn, because I thought that would be a good plan. Didn't make my charge, tried to get in with the wretched one as well, didn't make it in. So my opponent still has the Grotlings available to chaff. We will see what happens there next turn. So for my opponent, he charged in with the Feral Orcs on my Warrior Chariot. I mostly tried to set it up such that I could countercharge with both units of Warrior Knights to just make quick work of the Feral Orcs. Because I went into this battle with no real good conception of how strong these Orc units are. And honestly, they do vary quite a bit in strength. Because the Feral Orcs, they start out with AP 0, and the Veteran Orcs, they start out with AP 1, which is quite a big thing against my list particularly. The Spears on the Feral Orcs make them AP 1, and the Spears on the Veteran Orcs make them AP 2. And the Iron Orcs, I believe they start out with AP 2, and then any weapon upgrade, like a great weapon, is going to improve their AP even further. My opponent, he does manage to touch my wretched one. I have to turn towards him because he can at some point no longer turn, and then I do get a overrun from my opponent into my warrior block with his Iron Orc chariots, if he does get there. He also did a charge with his Iron Orc Loner into my Forsworn, which I didn't really mind because it's mostly a block that is just then going to stick around. So I am quite happy to be able to stick my opponent's Loner just in a unit of Forsworn / wretched ones, whatever it's going to be at that point. I had cast Word of Iron onto the Forsworn, so they are at 1 of armor save. Then during the combat, my opponent doesn't go through the warrior chariot. He is in a horde formation. He doesn't count his ranks because the idol is too far away. And the Iron Orcs or the Iron Orc chariots, they gladly go through my wretched one, and they end up getting an overrun into my big block. My opponent was quite pleased about this, and I was quite surprised by that, because this block also contains my Chosen Lord with Burning Portent, who is, as you can see in the picture, currently not in combat because he's unable to close the door there. So this chariot, that is his shaman on the chariot, he doesn't circumvent, or he doesn't prevent my Chosen Lord from making way to a position where I can strike the rank of file and hopefully just annihilate the chariots before they can do any meaningful damage. On my left side, I do manage to countercharge with my Warrior Knights as I had anticipated, and that is something that makes me quite happy, to be honest. My opponent's turn, he does. I do get rid of the Foul Orcs. My opponent then proceeds to charge my Warrior Knights with his Veteran Orcs, and he just completely annihilates them, really. It's quite remarkable how many attacks you can get with a unit of Orcs. And there's also a Warlord with Shieldbreaker in there, which did help quite a bit. So actually this picture, I believe it is from my turn where I already... No, because this was the previous turn where I had already charged in with the Grotling, so now I am continuing the fight. However, the Iron Orc chariots, they do succumb to the Burning Portent Lord. My opponent's wizard flees away. I get to chase him. And I already rolled the dice, and then I was thinking that I would go into the front of the Iron Orc loner, and actually I would go into the flank. As it is a practice day, I just wanted to see what would happen as well. I discovered it was the flank, then I was like, oh, this was probably a mistake. But I want to see what's going to happen here. Because I had cast Word of Iron, the big version, onto my warriors, so I am at a 1 of armor save. I did give my opponent the flank of my unit, which is definitely not preferable. However, we'll see how it goes. So my opponent is striking with a front rank with 2 attacks per model. It's like 10 attacks because there's also a wizard in there. He has a champion for an extra 2 attacks, and he has 5 support attacks. It's like 15 attacks, hitting on 4s, winning on 2s with, for me, a 5 of armor at the end. In the end, he does like 2 or 3 wounds, and I do 2 or 3 wounds back. So we actually draw the combat here, I believe. Yeah, I believe that was it. So this is a picture at my turn, actually. Because then I do get the overrun with the Warrior Chariot into the flank of my opponent's Iron Orcs. Looking at this picture, I don't think I should have done that, because I also went back with the Pharaohs. Because I really have to still learn to play with this army, because what I just totally didn't see. What I did see is that I can charge in with the Warrior Knights onto my opponent's Iron Orcs. What I didn't see is that I just opened up the rear of my unit to my opponent's Veteran Orcs. So that was definitely a mistake. I was quite happily grinding out a block of Iron Orcs with my 3 different units that were by now engaged in the combat. Another unit of Veteran Iron Orcs or Veteran Orcs in the rear of my warrior unit would not be very advisable. However, that is exactly what happened. And this is a picture of my Chosen Lord in the middle of the fighting, with the Warrior Knights around him, with the Iron Orcs around him, my Alchemy Mage, and then in the rear the Feral Orc Warlord of my opponent, closing in on my warriors. Needless to say, this was a situation where my orcs, or where my Chosen Lord and Shaman were the only sorcerer were the only ones to survive. They did manage to get away from my opponent, and not being caught by the Pursuit, and then, as they're no longer the same unit, they form a new unit and they can rally under unmodified discipline. This is also something that I learned at a WTC someday. I was quite skeptical about this because I thought they would still have to test with a decimated roll. However, everything I find in the books is that they don't, and that they are just happy to rally. So the Warrior Knights, they also break. The Warrior Chariot gets stormed down. At this point, it looks a little bit more bleak for me than it did a couple of rounds before. But my general plan of just engaging my opponent's units with multiple units, generally it works. I do have now a counter charge with the Feldrax into the rear of my opponent's veteran orcs because he did chase me, but he cannot physically put his models down because he is at an inch distance in this situation, but if he would pivot, he comes within the inch of the Iron Orc loner that is still there, and the Wretched one. So he's not allowed to stand there, I believe. So you backtrack, and then this is your legal position. So my Feldrax would charge here, my opponent's gonna flee away towards this direction, then the Barbarians that are here at the Arc, they charged also into the Orcs, so they ended up over here. My Warriors could just not charge them because there was a piece of chaff in the way, so we get to this situation where my Warrior Knights cleaned up the chaff, my opponent's veteran Hawks fled all the way up here. And we have a really chosen lord that is just looking at the loner that is on the last wound remaining. Yeah, this is the current board state. There's not that much left. We are playing King of the Hill, by the way. My opponent has to get a scoring unit into this field. I have to get a scoring unit onto the hill for my objective to score. So I was planning with my Warrior Knights to just go up here onto the hill, since my opponent's orcs are still fleeing. He could rally now, he could probably stand in such a way that he can block this move for me, but yeah, I wasn't really hoping to score the objective at this point. However, at the end of the game, I do manage to score the objective because my opponent reforms as such. I do manage to move up my Chosen Lord because my opponent blocked me off with the Great Green Idol, but the Chosen Lord, together with the Warrior Knights, do manage to clean him up. Mostly thanks to burning board and rolling 2 6s to a wound, and my opponent not taking 5 wounds from that alone. Also in the field, my opponent's wizard gets there with the Iron Orcs, but in the end, the 6 remaining Iron Orcs, I can check how many there were. 7 remaining Iron Orcs, they don't hold out against the 15 Barbarians. So in the end, the objective is still mine. I think it was really lucky in the last couple of turns. Matchup-wise, list-wise, so matchup-wise, if you look at the start of the game, it's a lot of blocks, it's a lot of stuff that I have to get through. But this matchup against the Feral Orcs was way more favorable than I had anticipated. The matchup against the Veteran Orcs was kind of like how I imagined the Feral Orcs to be as well. So what I would do differently, basically a lot. It's going to be a long video if I go over everything that I want to do differently. Basically my magic, I want to focus it more on removing my opponent's special pieces like the loner, because I'm not going to really affect the big blocks that much, other than with combat buffs. The block in the middle was fine, the Warrior Knights on the flanks is fine, the Barbarians were not that useful this battle, but it's also matchup dependent. Could have played them a bit more forward to, or at least one block to harass the Grotlings a bit more, and also make use from the fact that they can flee, and my opponent doesn't really have that much long charging units, and also scoring doesn't really factor in this game. So I could have used them a bit more as chaff rather than just behind the lines. Those are things I just have to learn about the army. Generally, with the game, I am quite happy. As I say, I just have to practice a lot now and yeah, learn from the battle. So from this battle, I learned that Yeah, the Feldrox, they died again as well. So my experiences with the Feldrox for now. First game they got shot by a cannon and then they ran off the table. This game they got flank charged, I believe, by the Iron Hawks at this point. I could flee, wouldn't have given me anything, so I just stood in the hope that I could still do some damage. Then they took one wound too much or something, and then they broke, and then they got caught by the Iron Hawks. I think the setup I'm now doing like 350 points or something for 3 of them is not really worth it. Just because they feel like an expensive expendable unit, in the sense that I want to play them expendable, but they're not that expendable in the end. Yeah, with that, I would like to thank you for watching. It turned out to be a 14-6 in the end for the Warriors of the Dark Gods. And I will see you then next time.